My brother Marcus thought it was hilarious to tell everyone at our family reunion dinner about my failed catering business, painting me as the family disappointment while he played the golden child with his successful restaurant chain. 23 relatives laughed as he mocked my cute little food truck dreams and suggested I stick to making sandwiches. But when the dinner check arrived, and I saw whose corporate credit card was paying for this elaborate feast, I realized my beloved brother had been stealing from me for years. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like button if you have ever dealt with a manipulative sibling. Do not forget to subscribe, because this family drama gets absolutely insane, and you will want to see how I served my brother the coldest dish of justice he has ever tasted. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. The corporate credit card that paid for our family dinner belonged to Meridian Catering Solutions. I knew that name because it was the company that had systematically undercut every single one of my catering contracts over the past 3 years, somehow always knowing my exact bids and beating them by just a few dollars. As I sat there watching Marcus bask in the praise from our relatives about his business success, pieces of a horrifying puzzle began clicking into place. I had started Scarlett's Kitchen 2 years after graduating from culinary school, pouring my life savings of $15,000 into equipment permits and my first food truck. Marcus had been so supportive back then, always asking about my client meetings, my pricing strategies, and which events I was bidding on. He would listen with such genuine interest as I shared my business plans, my menu innovations, and my dreams of expanding into a full catering operation. What I thought was brotherly support had actually been corporate espionage. Marcus was not just running restaurants. He had secretly launched Meridian Catering Solutions 6 months after I started my business, using inside information about my operations to destroy me systematically. Every time I told him about a potential client, Meridian would mysteriously appear with a lower bid. When I mentioned struggling with supplier costs, Meridian would suddenly offer the same clients my exact services at prices I could not match. The evidence was sitting right there on that dinner receipt. Meridian Catering Solutions had catered this entire family reunion, the same reunion where Marcus was humiliating me for my business failures. He had literally profited from undermining me, then used those profits to throw a party where he could mock my struggles in front of our entire family. But the financial manipulation went deeper than just stealing my clients. Over the past year, I had been struggling with mysterious bank issues. My business checking account had been frozen twice due to suspicious activity that my bank could never fully explain. I had received notices about outstanding vendor payments that I knew I had already made. My credit score had inexplicably dropped, making it impossible to secure the small business loan I needed to keep my food truck running. I had confided all these problems to Marcus during our weekly coffee meetings, watching him nod sympathetically as he assured me that business was just tough and I should not give up. He had even offered to help me review my finances, claiming his restaurant experience would help identify where I was going wrong. Like a fool, I had given him access to my business banking information, thinking my big brother was trying to protect me. Now I realized Marcus had been sabotaging my financial standing while pretending to help. The frozen accounts, the phantom vendor disputes, the credit damage, all of it designed to strangle my business slowly while he positioned Meridian as the reliable alternative that my former clients could trust. The most devastating part was how he had weaponized our family relationships. Our cousin Jamie had hired me for her wedding, catering a contract worth $8,000 that would have kept my business afloat for months. 2 days before the event, Jamie had called in tears, explaining that she had to cancel because someone had told her I was having financial problems and might not be able to deliver. That someone had been Marcus, who had convinced her that hiring Meridian would be safer for such an important day. As I watched him laugh with our relatives about my supposed incompetence, I felt a cold rage building in my chest. This man had not just stolen my clients and sabotaged my finances, he had turned my own family against me, making them complicit in celebrating my downfall while believing his lies about my failures. The waitress brought the receipt back to our table, and I discreetly photographed it with my phone. Meridian Catering Solutions had charged our family $12,000 for this dinner, money that Marcus had essentially stolen from me and was now using to humiliate me publicly. The audacity was breathtaking. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. In his arrogance, he had gotten sloppy with covering his tracks. That corporate credit card was going to be the thread I would pull to unravel his entire operation. I knew enough about business documentation from my own struggles to understand that corporate expenses had to be justified, tracked, and reported. There would be records, communications, and evidence of everything he had done. I excused myself from dinner early, claiming a headache that was actually the first stirrings of a very calculated plan for revenge. As I drove home, I began mentally cataloging every suspicious incident, every coincidence, and every time Marcus had been conveniently positioned to benefit from my misfortune. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, asking if I was okay and suggesting we meet for coffee next week to talk about my business problems. The sheer hypocrisy of that message made me laugh out loud. He had no idea that his reign of manipulation was about to end. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting the most thorough investigation of my life, treating Marcus like the corporate criminal he had revealed himself to be. My first stop was the Secretary of State website, where I discovered that Meridian Catering Solutions had been incorporated exactly 6 months and 3 days after I had told Marcus about my business plan. The registered address was a shared office space downtown, but the corporate filings listed Marcus Thompson as the managing partner and sole owner. The next revelation came from my former clients themselves. I had always wondered how Meridian seemed to know exactly what I was offering and could consistently underbid me by such precise margins. So I started making phone calls, reaching out to every client I had lost over the past 3 years, under the pretense of seeking feedback to improve my services. The pattern that emerged was damning. Margaret Henderson from the law firm had originally been excited about my Italian menu proposal until someone called her claiming to be from a business review service, warning her about food trucks having reliability issues during large events. Patricia Williams from the marketing company had been ready to sign with me until she received an anonymous email with links to fake negative reviews about my catering service that had been posted on obscure websites. Most shocking was my conversation with David Park from the tech startup. He told me that a man claiming to be my business partner had called him directly explaining that I was having personal problems and suggesting that Meridian could provide the same menu I had proposed but with better reliability. That man had known details about my conversation with David that only someone with access to my business notes could have known. I realized Marcus had not just been passively stealing my information. He had been actively impersonating me and my representatives to destroy my reputation while steering clients toward Meridian. This went far beyond competitive business practices into fraud, identity theft, and potentially criminal business interference. My banking investigation revealed an even more sinister pattern. Those mysterious account freezes had coincided perfectly with my biggest potential contracts. Someone with knowledge of my business banking information had been filing false vendor complaints and suspicious activity reports, timing them to sabotage my ability to fulfill major catering jobs. I spent hours on the phone with my bank's fraud department, explaining the timeline of events and requesting detailed records of every inquiry and report made about my accounts. The customer service representative Janet became increasingly concerned as I described the pattern of sabotage. She scheduled me for an in-person meeting with their business banking security team, explaining that what I was describing sounded like systematic financial harassment designed to destroy my business. The security meeting was a revelation. Bank investigator Michael Rodriguez explained that business account interference of this type was a federal crime, especially when it involved false reporting and identity theft. He walked me through my account history, pointing out irregularities that I had never noticed. Someone had been making micro-inquiries about my account balance and pending transactions, inquiries that required either my personal banking information or access to someone authorized on my account. I felt sick remembering how I had added Marcus as an emergency contact on my business banking, thinking it was responsible planning in case something happened to me. He had been using that access to monitor my finances in real time, timing his sabotage perfectly to maximize damage. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. My friend Lisa worked in digital marketing and had helped me set up my business website and social media presence. When I told her about my investigation, she offered to check the analytics and search engine data for my business listing. What she found made my blood run cold. Someone had been systematically creating fake negative reviews, duplicate business listings with incorrect information, and search engine complaints about Scarlett's Kitchen. The IP addresses for these malicious activities traced back to the same network used by Marcus's restaurants. He had been waging a comprehensive digital assassination campaign against my business while comforting me about my declining online reputation. Lisa also discovered that someone had been paying for search engine ads that would appear when people search for my business name, directing them instead to Meridian's website. The payment method for these ads was traced to a business credit card registered under Marcus's name. Armed with this evidence, I reached out to Sarah Mitchell, a business attorney who specialized in corporate fraud cases. During our consultation, her expression grew increasingly serious as I walked through the timeline of Marcus's sabotage. She explained that I had grounds for multiple legal claims: fraud, business interference, identity theft, and conspiracy to damage my business reputation. Sarah recommended that I hire a private investigator to document any additional evidence before confronting Marcus directly. She warned me that experienced manipulators often destroyed evidence quickly once they realized they were being investigated. The private investigator, Tom Bradley, was a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate crime cases. Tom's investigation uncovered the full scope of Marcus's operation. Meridian was not just competing with me, it was specifically designed to destroy my business and steal my market share. Tom found email communications between Marcus and Meridian employees discussing my client meetings, obtained through sources I had trusted. He discovered that Marcus had been paying a former supplier of mine to provide information about my inventory costs and menu planning. Most damaging of all, Tom found evidence that Marcus had been planning this sabotage from the very beginning. Buried in Meridian's corporate documents was a business plan that explicitly outlined strategies for eliminating small-scale local competitors through information gathering and strategic market positioning. My business was mentioned by name as the primary target for these tactics. The business plan detailed exactly how Marcus intended to drive me out of business, then position Meridian to absorb my former client base and market territory. It was not competitive business strategy. It was a premeditated campaign to destroy my livelihood while maintaining his facade as the supportive big brother. As I sat in Sarah's office reviewing the evidence Tom had gathered, I felt a mixture of vindication and rage that I had never experienced before. Marcus had not just stolen my clients or damaged my business, he had orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy my professional life while manipulating me into trusting him with the very information he was using against me. The question now was not whether I had enough evidence to prove Marcus's crimes. I had more than enough to bury him legally and professionally. The question was how I was going to make him pay for what he had done, and how I was going to ensure that everyone who had laughed at me during that family dinner understood exactly what kind of monster they had been celebrating. The transformation from victim to strategist happened the moment I realized I was not Marcus's only target. During my investigation, I had discovered that Meridian's business plan included a comprehensive list of elimination targets, small food businesses throughout the city that Marcus had marked for systematic destruction. I was just the first and closest victim in what was clearly intended to be a much larger operation. Sarah Mitchell connected me with Elena Rodriguez, who ran a successful food truck collective that had been experiencing similar mysterious problems. When I shared my evidence with Elena, her face went pale. 3 of her collective members had lost major contracts to Meridian over the past 8 months, and 2 had been forced to close after experiencing the same banking problems and negative review campaigns that had nearly destroyed my business. Elena introduced me to James Washington, who owned a family barbecue restaurant that had been forced to close 6 months earlier after Meridian systematically stole their catering contracts and sabotaged their reputation. James had been trying to rebuild his business ever since working 2 jobs to support his family, while watching Marcus's restaurants expand into the locations where his competitors had been driven out. The three of us formed an informal alliance, sharing information and evidence about Marcus's operations. Elena had business records showing the same pattern of precise underbidding that I had experienced. James had documentation of the fake negative reviews and digital sabotage campaigns that had destroyed his online presence. Together, we painted a picture of Marcus as a serial business predator who had been systematically eliminating competition while building his empire on the ruins of family-owned restaurants. But we needed more than just evidence. We needed a platform to expose Marcus publicly and ensure that his crimes had real consequences. That platform came from an unexpected source, investigative journalist Maria Santos from Channel 7 News, who had been working on a series about corporate fraud in the local food industry. Maria had been investigating reports of anti-competitive business practices in the restaurant industry when Elena reached out to her with our story. During our first meeting with Maria, I could see her journalistic instincts sharpening as she realized the scope of Marcus's operation. She explained that what we had uncovered was not just personal revenge. It was a significant business crime story that could help protect other small business owners from similar predatory tactics. Maria's investigation added crucial professional credibility to our evidence. She had access to business databases and public records that revealed the full financial scope of Marcus's operations. Meridian was generating nearly $2 million in annual revenue built almost entirely on business stolen from competitors that Marcus had systematically destroyed. More importantly, Maria discovered that Marcus had been lying to his own investors and business partners. The corporate documents for Meridian claim that their rapid growth was due to innovative business strategies and superior service quality. There was no mention of the industrial espionage, digital sabotage, and financial harassment that had actually driven their success. Marcus was not just guilty of destroying small businesses, he was guilty of securities fraud and investor deception. The investigation also revealed that Marcus's restaurant empire was built on similarly questionable foundations. Several of his restaurant locations had been acquired under suspicious circumstances, with the previous owners reporting the same patterns of harassment and sabotage that had targeted food truck operators. Marcus had been running this operation for years, perfecting his techniques for destroying competitors and absorbing their market share. Elena connected us with Patricia Kim, a forensic accountant who specialized in business fraud cases. Patricia volunteered her services to analyze Marcus's business records and trace the financial connections between his various operations. Her analysis revealed sophisticated money laundering schemes designed to hide the profits from Marcus's sabotage campaigns while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business growth. Patricia discovered that Marcus had been using shell companies and fake vendor relationships to obscure the true source of Meridian's competitive advantages. The company was paying for services that did not exist, creating false expense reports to justify the costs of their sabotage operations, while reducing their tax liability through fraudulent business deductions. As our alliance grew, we attracted the attention of the Small Business Administration Fraud Investigation Unit. Agent Jennifer Walsh explained that Marcus's operation represented exactly the kind of predatory business practice that federal agencies were trying to combat. She offered to coordinate our evidence with her ongoing investigation into anti-competitive practices in the food service industry. Agent Walsh's involvement transformed our personal revenge mission into an official federal investigation. She explained that Marcus could face criminal charges for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy if our evidence proved as comprehensive as it appeared. The SBA investigation would also trigger audits of Marcus's business licenses, tax filings, and investor relationships, potentially exposing additional crimes that we had not yet discovered. The alliance expanded again when Tom Bradley, our private investigator, connected us with former Meridian employees who had quit in disgust over the company's practices. Amanda Foster had worked in Meridian's business development department and had been uncomfortable with the aggressive tactics she was being asked to use against competitors. She had detailed records of the instructions Marcus gave his staff for infiltrating competitor operations and gathering intelligence. Robert Kim had been Meridian's digital marketing coordinator and had been directly responsible for implementing the fake review campaigns and search engine manipulation that had damaged our businesses. Robert had kept copies of his work assignments, including specific instructions from Marcus about which businesses to target and how to maximize the damage to their online reputations. These insider testimonies provided the final pieces of evidence we needed to prove that Marcus's operation was not just unethical. It was a criminal conspiracy involving multiple employees and systematic fraud. Amanda and Robert were willing to testify against Marcus in exchange for immunity from prosecution for their roles in his schemes. By this point, our alliance had grown into a comprehensive legal and media campaign designed to expose Marcus's crimes and ensure that he faced appropriate consequences. Sarah Mitchell had assembled a legal team capable of pursuing both criminal charges and civil lawsuits against Marcus and his companies. Maria Santos had prepared a detailed news investigation that would broadcast our story to the entire city, warning other small business owners about Marcus's predatory tactics. But the most satisfying part of our strategy was the element of surprise. Marcus had no idea that his victims had discovered his crimes, much less that they had organized into an alliance capable of destroying his entire operation. He was still operating under the assumption that his sabotage campaigns were undetectable and that his victims would never connect their individual struggles to his systematic predation. The stage was set for a public confrontation that would expose Marcus's crimes to our family, his business partners, his investors, and the entire food service community. We had evidence allies, legal representation, and media coverage ready to launch. All we needed was the perfect moment to spring our trap and watch Marcus's empire of lies collapse around him. That moment was about to come at the worst possible time for Marcus, during the grand opening celebration for his newest restaurant, where he would be surrounded by investors, family members, and business partners who still believed he was a legitimate success story, rather than a criminal who had built his fortune by destroying other people's dreams. The betrayal came from the person I least expected, Elena Rodriguez, the food truck collective leader who had seemed like my strongest ally. 3 days before we were scheduled to execute our plan at Marcus's restaurant opening, Elena called an emergency meeting with our entire alliance. When we gathered in Sarah Mitchell's conference room, Elena's demeanor was completely different from the passionate advocate who had been fighting alongside us for weeks. "I have been thinking about the legal risks we are all taking," Elena began, avoiding eye contact with me. "Maria's news investigation could expose all of us to defamation lawsuits if we cannot prove everything in court. Maybe we should consider a private settlement with Marcus instead of going public." The suggestion hit the room like a bomb. James Washington immediately objected, pointing out that we had spent weeks building an airtight case specifically to avoid those legal risks. Agent Walsh had already confirmed that our evidence was sufficient for federal prosecution. Sarah Mitchell looked confused, explaining that backing down now would actually increase our legal exposure, not decrease it. But Elena was persistent, suggesting that Marcus might be willing to pay financial settlements to all of his victims in exchange for keeping the matter private. She painted a picture of Marcus as someone who had made mistakes but deserved a chance to make things right without destroying his entire life. The woman who had called Marcus a serial business predator just 2 weeks earlier was now advocating for mercy and second chances. My suspicion turned to horror when Elena pulled out a folder containing copies of all our evidence investigation notes and legal strategies. She explained that she had been approached by Marcus's legal team, who had offered her a substantial settlement in exchange for information about our plans. Elena claimed that she had not accepted the money yet, but she wanted us to consider whether we were being fair to Marcus by pursuing such aggressive consequences. The room erupted in arguments as Elena defended her position, while James and I accused her of being bought off by the man who had destroyed our businesses. Sarah Mitchell immediately called for a recess, pulling me aside to explain that Elena's betrayal had potentially compromised our entire legal strategy. If Marcus knew our plans in advance, he could destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and prepare legal defenses that would make prosecution much more difficult. Agent Walsh was furious when she learned about Elena's contact with Marcus's lawyers. She explained that Elena had potentially obstructed a federal investigation by sharing confidential information with the target of that investigation. Elena could now face criminal charges herself, regardless of whether she had actually accepted money from Marcus. The betrayal was devastating on multiple levels. Elena had not just compromised our legal case, she had violated the trust that had bound our alliance together. James felt personally betrayed because he had shared deeply personal information about his family's financial struggles with Elena, believing she understood the pain of losing everything to Marcus's predatory tactics. But the most crushing aspect of Elena's betrayal was the realization that Marcus had been manipulating our alliance from the very beginning. Through Elena, he had known about our investigation, our evidence gathering, and our plans for public exposure. He had been preparing counter-strategies while we believed we were operating in secret. Maria Santos called an emergency meeting to discuss whether her news investigation could proceed, given the compromised security of our evidence. She explained that journalistic ethics required her to verify independently that Marcus had not destroyed or altered evidence in response to Elena's information sharing. The investigation would need to be delayed while she confirmed the integrity of our documentation. The delay was exactly what Marcus needed to launch his own preemptive strike against our alliance. Within 24 hours of Elena's betrayal, James Washington received a cease and desist letter from Marcus's lawyers, threatening him with defamation lawsuits if he continued spreading false accusations about Meridian's business practices. Amanda Foster and Robert Kim, our insider witnesses from Meridian, both received similar legal threats, along with warnings that their immunity agreements might not protect them if they provided testimony based on illegally obtained evidence. Most devastating of all, I discovered that my own business banking accounts had been frozen again, this time with a court order claiming that I was using my business finances to fund a harassment campaign against a legitimate competitor. Marcus had used Elena's information to file false legal complaints that portrayed our investigation as a vindictive attack rather than a legitimate fraud investigation. The legal freeze meant that I could not afford to continue paying Sarah Mitchell's legal fees or Tom Bradley's investigation costs. Our alliance was not just compromised, it was being systematically dismantled by the same predatory tactics that Marcus had used to destroy our businesses originally. As I sat in my apartment that night staring at legal documents that threatened to bankrupt me for seeking justice against the man who had already destroyed my business, I felt a despair deeper than anything I had experienced during Marcus's original sabotage campaign. The system that was supposed to protect small business owners from predators was being weaponized by those same predators to silence their victims. Elena's betrayal had taught Marcus exactly how vulnerable our alliance was and exactly which pressure points would cause it to collapse. He was using that information methodically, targeting our finances, our legal representation, and our witness testimony with surgical precision. But Elena had made one critical mistake in her rush to cash in on Marcus's settlement offer. She had betrayed our alliance before confirming that Marcus would actually pay her the money he had promised. When she showed up at Sarah Mitchell's office the next morning, demanding legal protection from the criminal charges she was now facing, Elena discovered that Marcus had never intended to honor their agreement. Marcus had used Elena to gather intelligence about our plans, then discarded her just as ruthlessly as he had discarded every other person who had served his purposes. Elena's betrayal had destroyed our alliance, but it had also left her facing federal charges for obstruction of justice, with no protection from the man she had trusted to save her. The irony was bitter, but not satisfying. Elena's downfall did not restore our compromised investigation or undo the damage her betrayal had caused to our legal case. We were still facing an uphill battle against an opponent who now knew our every strategy and had already begun implementing countermeasures to neutralize our evidence. As our alliance crumbled around Elena's betrayal, I realized that seeking justice against Marcus would require a completely different approach, one that did not rely on alliances that could be bought, evidence that could be compromised, or legal strategies that could be anticipated and countered. The salvation came from the most unexpected source, Marcus himself in his own arrogance. While he had successfully neutralized Elena and disrupted our alliance, Marcus made the classic mistake of believing his own propaganda about being untouchable. His confidence in having defeated us led him to make the kind of sloppy error that would ultimately destroy him completely. 2 days after Elena's betrayal had seemingly ended our investigation, I received a call from Detective Lisa Park with the Financial Crimes Unit. She explained that Marcus had made a critical error while trying to silence our witnesses. He had used the same fraudulent tactics against federal witness Amanda Foster that he had used against small business owners for years. Amanda had received threatening letters from Marcus's lawyers claiming that her testimony would constitute perjury and that she could face criminal prosecution for cooperating with our investigation. But Amanda had recorded her conversations with Marcus during her employment at Meridian, and those recordings proved that everything in her testimony was absolutely true. When Marcus's lawyers threatened her with perjury charges for telling the truth, Amanda realized that Marcus was continuing his pattern of intimidation and fraud even while under federal investigation. Detective Park explained that threatening federal witnesses was a serious crime that carried mandatory prison sentences. Marcus's attempt to silence Amanda had actually strengthened the federal case against him while providing prosecutors with additional criminal charges that would be much easier to prove in court. But the real breakthrough came when Amanda shared those recorded conversations with federal investigators. The recordings revealed that Marcus had been planning to expand his predatory business model, nationally franchising Meridian's sabotage techniques to eliminate small food businesses across the country. The conversations included detailed discussions of which markets to target first and how to identify vulnerable competitors who could be easily destroyed. Agent Walsh explained that these recordings transformed Marcus from a local business criminal into a potential racketeering defendant. The federal government was now building a case that could result in decades of prison time and complete forfeiture of Marcus's business empire. The investigation had grown far beyond our small alliance to become a major federal prosecution. The second piece of our salvation came from Tom Bradley's continued investigation, which had uncovered financial evidence that Marcus's own lawyers had not known about. While Elena's betrayal had exposed our legal strategies, it had not compromised Tom's independent investigation into Marcus's business finances. Tom discovered that Marcus had been systematically embezzling money from his restaurant investors to fund Meridian's sabotage operations. The shell companies and fake vendor relationships that Patricia Kim had identified were not just tax evasion schemes. They were investor fraud schemes that had stolen over $600,000 from people who believed they were investing in legitimate restaurant expansions. When Tom shared this evidence with Sarah Mitchell, she immediately recognized that we had stumbled onto a much larger criminal conspiracy than anyone had realized. Marcus was not just guilty of sabotaging competitors, he was guilty of securities fraud, investor theft, and money laundering on a scale that would interest federal prosecutors regardless of what happened to our small business case. The third breakthrough came from Maria Santos's continued investigation, which had uncovered the digital evidence that Elena's betrayal could not compromise. Maria had been working with cybersecurity experts to analyze the fake review campaigns and search engine manipulation that had damaged our businesses. The cybersecurity analysis revealed that Marcus's digital sabotage operation was much more sophisticated than we had realized. Meridian had been using advanced software to create thousands of fake online identities, generate believable negative reviews, and manipulate search engine results for dozens of competing businesses. The scope of the digital fraud was so extensive that it caught the attention of the FBI's cybercrime division. Most importantly, the digital evidence was completely independent of Elena's compromised information. Marcus could not destroy or alter the digital footprints that his sabotage campaigns had left across the internet. The fake reviews, fraudulent business listings, and search engine manipulation were permanently documented in ways that no legal maneuvering could eliminate. But our most powerful new ally came from within Marcus's own family. His younger sister, Rebecca Thompson, had been working as Meridian's business manager and had been increasingly uncomfortable with the company's practices. When Rebecca learned about the federal investigation through family conversations, she reached out to Agent Walsh directly to provide insider testimony about Marcus's operations. Rebecca had access to Marcus's personal communications business records and strategic planning documents that no external investigation could have uncovered. She revealed that Marcus had been planning to sabotage my business from the moment I told him about my catering plans at a family barbecue 3 years earlier. Rebecca had emails and text messages proving that Marcus viewed family loyalty as a weakness to exploit rather than a bond to honor. The most damaging evidence Rebecca provided was Marcus's personal planning journal, where he had documented his strategies for destroying competitors while maintaining plausible deniability. The journal included detailed profiles of every business owner he had targeted, along with psychological assessments of their vulnerabilities and specific plans for exploiting their weaknesses. My profile in Marcus's journal was particularly chilling. He had identified my trust in family relationships as my primary weakness and had developed a comprehensive plan for using that trust to gather intelligence while positioning himself as my supportive protector. The journal proved that every moment of apparent brotherly concern had been a calculated manipulation designed to gather information for my destruction. Rebecca also revealed that Marcus had been recording our family gatherings, including the dinner where he had humiliated me publicly. He kept these recordings as entertainment, replaying moments where his victims trusted him while he plotted their destruction. The recordings included conversations where Marcus bragged to his business partners about his ability to manipulate family relationships for competitive advantage. When Rebecca shared these recordings with federal investigators, Agent Walsh confirmed that we now had evidence of premeditated fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering that would result in serious federal charges regardless of any legal maneuvering Marcus might attempt. The final piece of evidence came from Marcus's own security cameras at Meridian's offices. Rebecca had access to the security footage showing Marcus and his employees planning sabotage operations against specific competitors. The footage included meetings where Marcus instructed employees on how to create fake negative reviews, file false vendor complaints, and infiltrate competitor operations to gather intelligence. As Rebecca shared month after month of recorded evidence with federal investigators, I realized that Marcus had documented his own crimes so thoroughly that prosecution would be virtually guaranteed. His arrogance and need to control every detail of his operations had led him to create a comprehensive record of criminal activity that no legal defense could explain away. With Rebecca's insider evidence, the federal cybercrime documentation, and Tom Bradley's financial investigation, our case had evolved from a small business dispute into a major federal prosecution that Elena's betrayal could not derail. Marcus had defeated our original alliance, but his own criminal behavior had attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies with resources and authority that no corporate lawyer could intimidate or bribe. The final confrontation happened exactly where it needed to, at Marcus's restaurant empire grand opening, surrounded by the investors he had been defrauding and the family members who had celebrated my humiliation. But this time, I was not the victim being mocked. I was the architect of his complete downfall, backed by federal agents and armed with evidence that would destroy everything he had built on lies and theft. The grand opening was supposed to be Marcus's moment of ultimate triumph. He had invited 200 guests, including restaurant investors, city council members, food industry leaders, and our entire extended family. The event was being broadcast live on social media, with Marcus positioning himself as a successful entrepreneur who had built his empire through hard work and innovative business strategies. I arrived with Rebecca, Agent Walsh, Detective Park, and Maria Santos, whose news crew was documenting everything for the investigative report that would air immediately after Marcus's arrest. The federal agents had coordinated the timing perfectly. Marcus would be taken into custody at the peak of his celebration in front of everyone who had believed his lies about legitimate business success. Marcus spotted me across the crowded restaurant and approached with his usual confident smirk, clearly believing that Elena's betrayal had neutralized any threat I might pose. He was planning to humiliate me again, this time in front of his investors and industry colleagues, cementing his reputation while destroying mine completely. "Scarlett, I am so glad you could make it," Marcus said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I was hoping you would see what a real successful restaurant operation looks like. Maybe it will inspire you to try again with your little food truck dreams." The crowd around us chuckled just as our family had laughed at that reunion dinner months earlier. But this time, Marcus's mockery was being recorded by federal investigators as evidence of his continued harassment of his victims. Agent Walsh stepped forward, badge visible, as Detective Park moved to block Marcus's exit routes. "Marcus Thompson, you are under arrest for federal racketeering securities, fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to interfere with interstate commerce," Agent Walsh announced clearly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The restaurant fell completely silent as federal agents handcuffed Marcus in front of his investors, family members, and business associates. Maria Santos's news crew captured every moment as Detective Park read the full list of charges, which included over 30 separate counts of fraud, theft, and business interference spanning 3 years of criminal activity. Rebecca stepped forward to address the shocked crowd, explaining that she had been cooperating with federal investigators to expose Marcus's criminal enterprise. She revealed that Meridian Catering Solutions was not a legitimate business, but a systematic fraud operation designed to destroy competitors through illegal sabotage, financial manipulation, and digital harassment campaigns. The investors who had funded Marcus's restaurant expansion were horrified to learn that their money had been used to finance criminal operations rather than legitimate business growth. Several of them immediately called their lawyers, realizing that they might be able to recover their investments through federal asset forfeiture proceedings. Our extended family members, who had laughed at my business failures, were forced to confront the reality that they had been celebrating a criminal who had systematically destroyed his own sister's livelihood while manipulating their sympathies. The family dinner, where Marcus had humiliated me, was revealed as a victory celebration funded by money he had literally stolen from me. Agent Walsh announced that federal investigators would be seizing all of Marcus's business assets, including his restaurants, Meridian's equipment, and his personal property purchased with proceeds from fraud. The grand opening celebration was immediately shut down as federal agents began documenting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The legal consequences for Marcus were swift and severe. Federal prosecutors filed charges that could result in over 40 years in prison and complete financial restitution to all of his victims. Marcus's business empire, built on systematic fraud and criminal sabotage, was dismantled completely within weeks of his arrest. But the personal consequences were equally satisfying. Marcus's arrest became a major news story that exposed his predatory business practices to the entire food service industry. Other victims of his sabotage campaigns came forward with additional evidence, leading to expanded federal charges and civil lawsuits that would ensure Marcus could never rebuild his criminal enterprise. Elena Rodriguez was also arrested for obstruction of justice and conspiracy, facing federal prison time for her role in compromising our investigation. Her food truck collective was disbanded as other members discovered that Elena had been sharing their business information with Marcus even before our alliance was formed. James Washington was able to reopen his barbecue restaurant using restitution money from Marcus's seized assets. Amanda Foster and Robert Kim received federal protection and financial compensation for their cooperation with the investigation. The small business owners who had been targeted by Marcus's sabotage campaigns were able to rebuild their operations without fear of continued harassment. For me, the victory was both professional and personal. I received full restitution for the business income Marcus had cost me, along with additional damages for the emotional distress and reputation damage his campaigns had caused. More importantly, I had the satisfaction of exposing a predator who would never be able to harm other small business owners again. The experience taught me that real justice requires more than personal revenge. It requires courage to stand up for other victims and commitment to ensuring that predators face consequences that prevent them from continuing their harmful behavior. Building relationships with other survivors and working within the legal system ultimately provided more powerful and lasting justice than any individual retaliation could have achieved. My new catering business, launched with restitution money and support from the small business community, became more successful than I had ever dreamed possible. The publicity from exposing Marcus's crimes brought me clients who specifically wanted to support a business owner who had fought back against corporate predators. Most importantly, I learned that chosen family, the people who stand with you during the hardest fights, can be more valuable than blood relationships that are built on manipulation and exploitation. Rebecca, James, Amanda, and the other allies who helped expose Marcus's crimes became my real family, bound together by shared values rather than shared DNA. As I look back on this experience, I realize that Marcus's greatest mistake was underestimating the power of people who have been pushed too far and decide to fight back together. He thought that family loyalty would always work in his favor, but he learned that real loyalty is earned through honesty and respect, not inherited through shared genetics. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was systematically sabotaging your life while pretending to support you? Have you found the courage to fight back against someone more powerful who thought they were untouchable? I would love to hear your stories of standing up to workplace bullies, family manipulators, or business predators in the comments below. If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories where karma finally catches up with people who think they can get away with anything. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that fighting back against powerful manipulators is possible when you build the right alliances and refuse to give up. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey from victim to survivor to victor. Remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and exploitation. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you were born into, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let predators destroy your dreams. Stay strong, keep fighting for justice, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve to be treated badly by people who claim to love you.